They said the war ended in 1945, but deep beneath the Arctic ice, engines were still running, radios still whispered, and secrets were still buried in the cold. This is the story of the front no one remembers. A place where steel met snow, where submarines stalked beneath frozen seas, where outposts flickered in polar night. A front where the line between science and survival disappeared, where the world's greatest powers fought not only each other, but the planet itself. The Arctic was more than a wasteland. It was a silent chessboard of weather, code, and endurance, and it may hold the last untold story of World War II. When most people think of the Second World War, they imagine Stalingrad's rubble, Normandy's beaches, or the deserts of North Africa. Few imagine the endless North, a frozen ocean stretching from Norway to Alaska. Yet here, beyond the map's edge, the war carved out its coldest theater. The Arctic was both a graveyard and a highway. Whoever controlled its shipping lanes could starve an empire or save one. Oil, iron, nickel, and even weather itself became weapons. The sea here was cruel. Temperatures dropped below -40. Salt spray froze into armor over decks. Ships vanished into fog that swallowed both sky and compass. And in that frozen silence, the war whispered. The Northern Lifeline. By 1941, Britain was starving. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, cutting off supplies. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, the Allies needed a new route, a desperate lifeline to send weapons and food to Stalin. They called it the Arctic convoys. From ports in Scotland and Iceland, ships loaded with tanks, trucks, and fuel steamed north straight into the jaws of the enemy. It was the shortest route to Murmansk, but the deadliest in the world. German submarines lurked under the ice. Luftwaffe bombers circled from bases in Norway. Storms smashed ships before the enemy even saw them. Men who survived said the cold was worse than the bombs. If you fell into the water, you had 90 seconds before your heart stopped. 90 seconds to become a ghost. Yet they kept sailing, because if they stopped, the Eastern Front would starve. Germany's Northern Empire, far to the north, Hitler's planners saw opportunity. The Arctic offered bases to strike convoys, mines to feed industry, and a gateway to the pole itself. The Nazis built hidden weather stations on islands few had ever seen: Spitsbergen, Franz Josef Land, even the Greenland coast. They were codenamed with chilling simplicity: Nosp, Howdigan, Schatzgräber, Bud, Tough Guy, Treasure Hunter. Small teams of soldiers and scientists were dropped by submarine or seaplane, ordered to survive for months with nothing but sled dogs, canned rations, and static crackling radios. Their mission: predict the weather for the Reich's armies and U-boats. In total war, even the wind became intelligence. If Berlin knew tomorrow's storm, it could decide whether bombers flew or fleets sailed. Some stations lasted only weeks. Others vanished, swallowed by snow and secrecy. Life at the edge of the world. Imagine a handful of men on an island of ice. The sun gone for 4 months. The wind like a saw through your clothes. They fought frostbite, loneliness, and the quiet insanity of endless night. They hunted seals. They melted snow for water. They sent coded reports every 6 hours, each letter worth more than gold. Some grew delusional. One station commander, isolated for almost a year, kept writing weather logs even after his radio froze, entries drifting into madness, numbers turning to poetry about the sun that would never rise. The Arctic changed them. The war outside became a rumor. Their enemy was the cold. The hunters below. Beneath the ice, another war raged, the silent duel of submarines. German U-boats hunted convoys in the Barents Sea, using the darkness as camouflage. Their captains were young, confident, worshipped at home. But up here, the sea showed no loyalty. Ice sheets crushed hulls. Periscopes froze. Salt water leaked into battery cells, releasing chlorine gas. And when depth charges exploded, shock waves ricocheted under the ice cap, echoing for minutes like thunder in a cathedral. Some boats simply disappeared, crushed or frozen, their crews entombed forever. Today, sonar still finds their shapes on the seabed. Perfectly preserved steel coffins half buried in silt, their names long forgotten. The burning port. The convoys that survived the Arctic storms reached the Soviet port of Murmansk, a city under siege from the air. For 3 years, bombs fell almost daily, but the port never closed. Women and teenagers unloaded crates of American trucks and British tanks while sirens wailed. Ice clogged the cranes. The smell of diesel and smoke hung in the frozen air. The Soviet people called Murmansk the city that would not die. Its harbor lights dimmed. Flickering through snow became symbols of endurance, visible even from the sea. Neutral. No more. To the west, neutral countries watched the Arctic turn to battlefield. Norway, swallowed by occupation, became the Reich's northern fortress. From Narvik to Tromsø, the Germans carved tunnels into mountains, built submarine pens, and stationed tens of thousands of troops. Across the ocean, the United States eyed the same ice. Before officially entering the war, American engineers began building airstrips in Greenland under weather research cover, but they were really outposts of a coming global struggle. The polar region was no man's land, and every power wanted a foothold. The War of the Clouds. At first glance, weather seems harmless, but by 1943, both sides treated it as a weapon. A single low-pressure front could ground bombers or sink convoys. Whoever controlled meteorology controlled momentum. That's why secret stations like Hodegen mattered more than entire battalions. Buried under snow, their barometers and radios influenced the decisions of generals hundreds of miles away. The irony was profound. Men freezing in tents decided when armies far south would burn cities. Operation Wonderland. In 1942, Germany launched an audacious naval strike into the Kara Sea, codenamed Operation Wonderland. The battleship Admiral Scheer slipped through pack ice to attack Soviet convoys and coastal stations. It was supposed to prove that even the Arctic wasn't safe. But the ice closed behind them. Navigation failed. Radios jammed. The mission turned into a labyrinth of fog and fear. They shelled a few depots, then vanished back into the mist, chased by phantom destroyers. Propaganda called it victory. In truth, it was chaos. The Arctic was undefeated. When science turns ghostly, by late 1944, the Reich was collapsing. Yet its weather stations still transmitted ghost signals bouncing through static. Allied monitors could tell some were automated, others still manned. No one knew who was alive or dead. When Germany finally surrendered, a Norwegian trawler stumbled upon one of these outposts on Svalbard. The soldiers there had not been told the war was over. They surrendered peacefully to astonished seal hunters and became the last German unit to give up, months after Berlin fell. Their final weather log simply read, sky overcast, temperature -12, situation uncertain, Staffen, calm, end quote. Post-war shadows. The Cold War began almost immediately. The same islands once used for Nazi science were now claimed by new powers chasing missiles and satellites. The Arctic, again, became the frontier now for nuclear submarines and radar lines instead of convoys and U-boats. The ghosts of the Second World War were simply given new uniforms. Even today, climate researchers still uncover rusted bunkers and weather instruments sealed in ice, journals perfectly preserved, ink as dark as the day it was written. Each artifact whispers the same truth. The war never really ended here. It just froze in place. Reflection. The Forgotten Axis wasn't about armies or ideology. It was about endurance, about men on all sides sent into the most merciless environment on Earth and told to win. They learned what no textbook can teach, that survival is the purest form of victory. The Arctic remembers everything, every flare, every ship, every signal, lost in the static of time. And as the ice melts, piece by piece, it reveals what the war tried to hide. The truth that beneath the snow, humanity's coldest chapter still breathes. Night never truly leaves the Arctic. Even when the sun rises, it hangs low and ember behind the clouds. The war here moved in rhythm with the light. Weeks of darkness, then weeks of blinding glare, while soldiers bled on familiar fronts. This silent theater turned into a laboratory of endurance. Each nation pushed north, not only for victory, but for knowledge. Weather, magnetism, and radio were the new weapons. Whispers beneath the aurora. Above the convoys shimmered curtains of green light. The aurora borealis. It wasn't just beautiful, it was deadly. Ionized air-warped radio signals. Pilots vanished mid-sentence, their transmissions bending across the pole. Allied cryptographers called it ghost chatter, believing enemy stations were jamming them. In truth, nature itself was rewriting the code. In frozen bunkers, engineers adjusted dials with numb fingers, chasing clarity through static. Every successful connection felt like pulling a voice out of eternity. Allied shadow teams. By 1942, British and Norwegian commandos launched secret missions to destroy German weather outposts. They landed in silence, sleds dragging crates of TNT over black ice. The teams were ghosts themselves, wearing white smocks that made them vanish into the drifts. Sometimes they never returned. Sometimes they watched from a ridge as their own ships sank under Luftwaffe attack, trapped between blizzard and fire. Their victories were measured not in cities captured, but in seconds of radio silence achieved. The Soviet polar miracle. On the other side of the front, the Soviet Union turned its north into a line of life. Icebreakers carried food to starving outposts. In Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, engineers built rails through tundra that had never known metal. Each train carried more than supplies, it carried defiance. Children shoveled snow from tracks under bombardment, singing patriotic songs to drown fear. They called the Arctic the iron heart of the motherland. When German planes struck, the snow itself erupted, but the trains kept moving. The Lost Convoy, PQ-17, July 1942. Convoy PQ-17. 35 merchant ships left Iceland for Murmansk under the midnight sun. It was the pride of Allied logistics until fear tore it apart. Rumors said the battleship Tirpitz was on the hunt. Admiralty orders split the convoy. Scatter every ship for itself. The Arctic became a graveyard overnight. U-boats and bombers descended like sharks. One by one, ships vanished into oil-slicked water. Of 35, only 11 reached port. The survivors said the sea glowed with burning fuel for 3 nights straight. The Arctic remembered every name. Echoes from below. Decades later, divers found the wrecks. Hull plates still gleamed under silt. Cargo, tanks, boots, coffee beans, frozen into solid blocks. Letters sealed in bottles. Never sent. Still readable. Tell my son, the ocean sings when it freezes. Historians call PQ-17 a disaster. Sailors called it a curse. But for the Soviets, it was proof the West would bleed for them, and that alliance hardened into steel. The weather war intensifies. By late 1943, meteorology had become espionage. Allies captured codebooks not for troop plans but for cloud patterns. In Bletchley Park, mathematicians built early computers to forecast storms faster than the Germans could. Each accurate prediction saved convoys and bombers alike. Some historians say D-Day began not on June 6th, but in Arctic ice months earlier, where a small station's data signaled a brief weather break. Without that northern forecast, Normandy might have drowned before it began. The Phantom Base. Rumors spread of a lost German base deep inside the Greenland ice station, Schatzgräber, treasure hunter. Its existence remained legend until 2016, when explorers uncovered twisted metal huts, rusted cartridges, and weather instruments still standing. Inside a diary frozen to a table, the final entry read, "Foxes infected cannot eat, waiting for extraction." The men had poisoned themselves on polar bear meat laced with parasites. No one came for months. When they were rescued, they were half mad, repeating weather codes in their sleep. Even nature had joined the war. The Polar Engineers. American engineers, meanwhile, experimented with an impossible dream. Floating air bases built from ice. Project Habakkuk. The plan: construct a battleship from frozen pulp and sawdust, stronger than steel, unsinkable. Tests in Canada proved it could work, but by the time the prototype was ready, the war had moved south. The Arctic giant melted in silence. Its wreckage still rests at the bottom of Lake Patricia, a ghost of human imagination. The Northern Front burns. In 1944, the Soviet army surged west through the Kola Peninsula. German mountain troops, hardened by years in snow, resisted with brutal skill. Entire villages burned for warmth and retreat. Reindeer herders fled into tundra, guiding civilians through blizzards to safety. They carried not rifles, but ancient knowledge: how to find moss beneath snow, how to survive when the sun disappears. When the Soviets finally liberated Kirkenes, the first town in Norway freed from Nazi rule, soldiers wept from exhaustion. They had marched through an empire of ice to reclaim a frozen dream. As the war dragged toward its end, silence reclaimed the North. Abandoned stations vanished beneath drifts. Submarines lay motionless under miles of water, and the aurora flickered once more over a battlefield without graves. But in that silence, a new war was already breathing, the cold one. The guns fell silent in Europe, but in the North, the air never warmed. The war's smoke froze into the Arctic sky and stayed there, shadows that refused to melt. While the world celebrated victory, new ships slipped quietly into northern seas. New scientists opened the old bunkers, and a new kind of battle began: the race for the pole. The war that wouldn't die. When Berlin burned, many assumed the Arctic War was over. But in the summer of 1945, trawlers and patrol craft still intercepted strange radio bursts echoing through polar static. They came from nowhere, then vanished. Some were automated Nazi transmitters, still ticking like heartbeats in the snow. Others were something else. Encrypted tests by new masters of the world, probing the silence left behind. The same technologies that once predicted storms were now measuring radiation, magnetism, and trajectory. The Arctic was becoming a laboratory for the atomic age, the Ghost Station. That same year, a Norwegian team discovered Weather Station Again on Svalbard. Its crew had not heard that Germany had surrendered 2 months earlier. They emerged from their bunker wearing tattered uniforms, rifles rusted, cheeks hollow. Their first question was not about the Reich, but the weather. "Has the wind changed?" their commander asked. Even in defeat, they thought in data. They became the last German unit to surrender in all of World War II. Their logbook ended with a single line: Visibility 0. Mission complete. Operation Tabarin, far to the south. Britain launched a secret mirror operation in Antarctica Tabarin to secure polar research stations before Germany or Argentina could claim them. Its men lived among penguins and perpetual ice, raising Union Jacks over frozen seas. Few realized this Antarctic mission was tied to the same intelligence web as the Arctic fronts. Whoever held the poles would hold the planet's climate, navigation, and skies. It was the birth of geopolar warfare, a term historians would coin decades later. The Soviet Polar Offensive. For the USSR, victory in Europe meant a new obsession. They poured resources into the Kola Peninsula and Siberian coast, building airstrips from gravel and permafrost. New stations rose where German bunkers once stood. MiG jets replaced Messerschmitts. Listening towers replaced weather masts. The Red Navy sent submarines under the ice to chart passages that could carry nuclear missiles one day. The Arctic, once a shield, became a sword. In these years, Soviet engineers created drifting bases, floating ice platforms, with laboratories, radio towers, even cinemas. Each drifted for months, sometimes years, before cracking apart and vanishing. Their coordinates were state secrets. Their discoveries reshaped military maps. America's Northern Awakening. Across the pole, the United States moved fast. Greenland became a fortress of radar domes and runways. Thule Air Base, the spear tip of early warning defense. Operation Nanook, Operation Ivy Bells, and countless unnamed missions followed, blending exploration with espionage. B-29 bombers carried scientists who dropped weather probes by day and reconnaissance cameras by night. They charted magnetic fields, ice thickness, and radio propagation. Every measurement was a weapon. From Alaska to Labrador, indigenous communities found themselves on the new front line. Villages were relocated to make room for airfields and DEW line radars, the distant early warning system. Where reindeer once crossed, antennas now hummed. The sky itself became an alarm, the frozen deterrent. By 1958, nuclear submarines could travel under the pole without surfacing. The USS Nautilus made the first under-ice transit, proving the ocean could hide an entire fleet. The Soviets answered with the K-3 Leninsky Komsomol. Sonar pings replaced gunfire. Silence became strategy. The Arctic turned into the world's largest minefield of listening posts. Each ping, each echo, each whale song could be misread as an enemy launch. One wrong interpretation, and the Cold War could have ended in atomic winter, the very fate that World War II had narrowly escaped. Scientists in the crossfire, meteorologists, once forgotten heroes, became prized spies. Their balloons measured fallout instead of clouds. Their data moved by encrypted teletype. Many had served in World War II. They recognized the pattern again. men were fighting over the weather. In 1952, British climatologist Alan Tucker wrote, "We've built an empire on ice. When it melts, our secrets will float to the surface." He was right. The same frozen archives that preserved Nazi equipment now preserved Cold War intelligence. The nuclear age in ice. The 1,960 seconds brought an even stranger project. Camp Century, a U.S. base carved beneath Greenland's ice cap. Officially a research station, unofficially a cover for Project Iceworm, an attempt to hide hundreds of nuclear missiles under the ice. Tunnels stretched for miles, lined with steel and snow. Generators melted rivers through the glacier. But the ice was alive. It moved, groaned, crushed walls. Within 5 years, Camp Century was abandoned. Its secrets sealed in shifting ice. Today, climate scientists drilling cores sometimes strike fragments of Cold War machinery. The Arctic keeps its evidence. Echoes of the old war, even as superpowers drew new borders. Remnants of the old conflict resurfaced. Fishermen found U-boat periscopes protruding from melting ice. Archaeologists unearthed crates of German codebooks, still wrapped in oilcloth. Some contained strange annotations, measurements of geomagnetic anomalies, not weather. What were they searching for? Perhaps resources. Perhaps something deeper knowledge, buried under ice long before any war began. Modern discoveries. In the 21st century, explorers with drones and radar began mapping every wreck and station lost to snow. Each discovery told two stories, one of courage, one of futility. Fuel drums from 1,943 still leak rainbow slicks across tundra ponds. Cables once used for Morse now coil like veins through permafrost. When the ice melts, it releases not only methane, but memory. The Second World War had ended. The Third had not begun. Yet here, between storm and star, humanity learned that power has no temperature. It simply changes form. From bullets to data, from bombs to codes, from men in trenches to satellites in orbit, the Arctic remained the proving ground of civilization's extremes. The world moved on, but the North never forgets. Under the aurora's ghostly light, the engines of empire still hum beneath the ice. The Arctic keeps what the world forgets. Every time a glacier cracks, the past breathes out. Each melt reveals a relic, a bullet, a boot, a rusted compass, and with it, another whisper from the war that refused to die. Beneath the snow, time moves differently. Here, metal outlives memory. Ghosts of the convoys. 70 years after the last battle, divers return to the Barents Sea. They descend through dark water where sunlight never reaches, flashlights cutting beams across the bones of PQ-17 and QP-13. Steel ribs rise from silt like cathedrals. Cargo still lies stacked. Jeeps, shells, coffee beans, typewriters. Each ship tells a story of courage paid in silence. Inside one wreck, a clock stopped at 3:12. The minute the bomb hit, divers whisper the names painted on hulls, as if speaking them will warm the dead. Murmansk's living memory. Onshore, the city of Murmansk endures. The harbor still smells of oil and salt. Elderly dock workers recall unloading Liberty ships under falling bombs, their hands trembling as they light cigarettes against the same wind that once froze their tears. A monument of two hands reaching skyward marks the convoy's route. Locals call it the Hands of the North. Every May, families gather beneath it, singing through snow. For them, the war never ended. It simply went quiet. The lost pilots of the ice. Farther east, Search teams trek through tundra, guided by rumors and satellite scans. They find wings protruding from permafrost, an American B-24 bomber lost since 1943. Inside, the crew still sits at their stations, preserved by cold, leather jackets unrotted, faces pale but peaceful. One pilot's logbook remains open on his knee. Visibility poor, heading true north. The team holds a moment of silence. Then they leave the cockpit untouched and alter to a war that paused itself in ice. Submarines in the deep. Sonar operators aboard modern icebreakers still detect shadows moving under the polar shelf. Some are whales, some are wrecks. A few, no one knows. U-boats, entombed in silt, sometimes ping when the ice shifts, echoing sonar like replies from ghosts. In 2013, a Norwegian vessel recorded one such echo, repeating at perfect 30-second intervals, the same code used by a missing U-boat in 1944. The signal ended abruptly, as if someone had finally answered. Operation Requiem. In the 1,980 seconds, joint Soviet and Western divers began recovering remains from sunken convoys. They called it Operation Requiem, a mission of reconciliation. For the first time, Russians, Americans, and Germans dived side by side. Underwater, flags and politics disappeared. Only names mattered. They placed plaques on wrecks, each engraved with a ship's last coordinates. In that frozen graveyard, enemies became caretakers, melting truths. As the planet warms, what the war buried rises again. Ice retreats from Greenland's coast, exposing canisters of fuel, crates of weapons, and entire German weather huts. Each artifact demands an answer. Who left this here? Why? Scientists in hazmat suits collect samples before toxins leak into meltwater streams. The past, it turns out, is not finished polluting the present. Archaeologists find journals sealed in tin boxes. One entry reads, "We thought we were building history. We were only feeding it." The human hunt. Families who never received telegrams now follow digital trails. DNA from recovered bones links descendants across continents. A woman in Minnesota learns her grandfather's ship went down near Novaya Zemlya. She travels there, lays flowers on frozen waves, and listens to wind whistling through rusted hulls. She whispers, "I found you." It's the sound of closure, echoing through 70 winters. The new explorers, modern expeditions, armed with drones and ground-penetrating radar, map everything the ice conceals. Each year they uncover new wrecks. Each year old questions melt open. They find a camera from a downed German reconnaissance plane. Inside, undeveloped film. When restored, the negatives show what no one expected. Allied ships not sinking, but rescuing. In the Arctic, even the truth freezes in layers. Peel one away, another emerges beneath. Echoes in the sky. Airlines now cross the same routes once patrolled by bombers. Pilots report magnetic anomalies, compass needles trembling as if remembering the past. On clear nights, the aurora curls like smoke trails from unseen engines. For a moment, the heavens replay the war's choreography in light instead of fire. The Arctic today. Oil rigs now stand where convoys once died. Submarines from new nations test missiles under the same ice sheets. Satellites orbit above, watching, measuring, waiting. Maps show economic zones, shipping corridors, drilling rights, but not the bones beneath. History's newest front line is drawn on top of the oldest grave. When you stand on the tundra, you feel nothing. No sound, no scent, only pressure. But beneath your boots lies an empire of silence. layered over empire of war. Each snowflake falls like a page closing. Yet the story never ends, because the ice keeps turning its own slow pages, revealing fragments of every generation that dared to conquer it. The Arctic is not a battlefield. It's a witness, and witnesses never forget. The Arctic is melting. But as the ice retreats, it is not the future that rises first, it's the past. Every thaw reveals a secret. Every meltwater stream carries the memories of men who vanished, believing the cold would last forever. Now, the world comes full circle. The war we buried in snow returns as mirror, warning, and prophecy. The thawing front. Summer light stretches 24 hours over Greenland's peaks. What once took centuries to erode now disappears in a single season. The ghosts of the war emerge like film developing in water. Dog tags, fuel drums, helmets, crates marked with black eagles and fading stars. Researchers kneel beside them not as conquerors, but as archaeologists of consequence. They measure radiation in melted snow, chemicals from forgotten machines, rust that bleeds into rivers. What the soldiers began, the climate continues. Science returns to the battlefield. Teams from every nation descend again. Scientists, not soldiers, yet they arrive in the same silence, under the same aurora. They drill cores through ice older than civilization. Inside, trapped air carries the signature of 1942. A spike of lead and soot from burning oil convoys. The war left fingerprints in the sky itself. Every breath we take contains its residue. History, it turns out, was never buried deep enough. The digital reconquest. Satellites orbit where the Luftwaffe once patrolled. Their cameras peer through clouds, tracing black scars of old runways. Algorithms read wrecks like ancient runes, matching shapes to archives, connecting stories once lost in frost. Through screens, the new explorers stand exactly where the old ones died, but with a god's eye view. The war that once demanded flesh now lives inside data, light, and code. And still, the Arctic remains the stage. The return of the powers. As ice breaks, ships again push north, but this time under different flags. Russia, America, China, Europe, all racing for minerals, shipping lanes, power. They build icebreakers, missile-proof ports, research domes that look like observatories. Each claims it is peace they seek, yet the patterns are familiar. The world is once more drawing battle lines across the same map of snow. In the hum of turbines and the drone of patrol aircraft, you can almost hear the echo of propellers from 1943. Voices in the wind. Elders from Arctic communities tell of nights when the wind carries whispers metallic, rhythmic, like Morse code. Scientists say it's the ice shifting. Locals say it's the dead remembering. Either way, the sound is always the same frequency, once used by weather stations long gone. Perhaps memory itself is electromagnetic. The lesson of endurance. Every soldier who froze beneath these skies fought for empire. Every researcher who now drills these glaciers fights for understanding. The enemy changed names. The battlefield remained the same. In 1943, survival meant heat. In 2025, it means restraint. Both demand courage. The Arctic has always tested humanity's limits of endurance, of greed, of humility. The snow judges us equally, echoes beneath the ice. Under polar seas, sonar still finds shapes that do not belong to the living. U-boats, tanks, aircraft, all preserved like prayers in crystal. They sleep together. German, British, Soviet, American. No flags wave here, only the rhythm of water over steel. If there is a heaven for machines, it is silent, dark, and cold. The Last Witness, a single meteorological sensor installed by scientists near the ruins of Station Houtigan, still transmits. Its signal is faint, repeating every hour. Pressure, temperature, wind direction. Sometimes static cracks, and the voice of the storm sounds almost human. If you tune in carefully, you can almost believe the Arctic itself is giving its final report. Visibility uncertain, sky changing, human presence unresolved, reflections in meltwater. When the sun sets, for the last time each autumn, the sea mirrors the color of old film, black, silver, white, the palette of history. Reflected in that mirror are 2 centuries, one that froze to conquer, and one that melts to survive. We watch ourselves in that reflection and wonder, did the war ever truly end? Or did it simply evolve into our struggle against time, memory, and the planet itself? They called it the forgotten axis, but the Arctic never forgets. It remembers every flare, every heartbeat that froze mid-breath. It remembers the thunder of convoys, the whisper of Morse, the sigh of snow on steel. And when the last glacier finally breaks, when the last relic surfaces from the deep, the world will see its own reflection in that thawing mirror. The price of power, the weight of endurance, the beauty of survival. The Arctic will melt, but its memory will remain frozen forever in us. Because the war beneath the ice was never just about nations. It was about what it means to be human. At the edge of the world, the war ended, but the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the sound of the world holding its breath. The ice became a new border not between armies, but between ideologies. And the Arctic, once a graveyard, became a chessboard again. Operation Nanook. The first summer after the war, American ships pushed north, not with guns, but with scientists, cameras, and Geiger counters. They call it Operation Nanook. Officially, meteorological research. Unofficially, a quiet search for everything Germany might have left behind. Beneath the guise of science, U.S. intelligence combs Svalbard, Greenland, and northern Norway for weather stations, U-boat wrecks, hidden archives. They find canisters marked with unfamiliar runes, remnants of Weather Station Kurt, a Nazi outpost frozen in 1944. Inside, coated logs, weather film, and vials labeled Project Icevogel. The data inside would feed the earliest Cold War weather models, the same ones later used for missile targeting. The war had changed its name, not its ambition. The Soviet North. Across the pole, the Soviets build cities where maps once showed only snow. Murmansk, Norilsk, Tixi iron and smoke in a world of white. By 1953, Stalin's engineers have carved airfields from permafrost and radar domes from ice. They call it the Northern Bastion. Beneath the ice, submarines begin to whisper. Nuclear ones. Their routes trace the same corridors once patrolled by U-boats, proof that history moves in circles, not lines. The atomic experiments. An unmarked cargo plane departs Thule Air Base in Greenland, carrying scientists from Los Alamos. Its mission, Iceworm. The goal to test whether an entire missile base could be buried in glacial tunnels invisible to satellites. They drill 40 meters down, install generators, bunk rooms, even a chapel. Camp Century is born. The city under ice. But the ice moves, crushing concrete walls like paper. By 1966, it's abandoned, sealed beneath snow. When it melts today, its nuclear waste still bleeds into the groundwater. Even the cleanest secrets leave stains. The Arctic Intelligence War. The 1,960 seconds turn the Arctic sky into an invisible battlefield. Spy planes fly over the pole, their cameras seeing the curvature of Earth for the first time. American U-2 seconds. Soviet M-55 seconds gliders in the stratosphere, tracing each other's contrails like ghosts dueling at dawn. Below, in the magnetic quiet of northern Canada, listening posts bloom. They call it the Distant Early Warning Line, the DEW line. Hundreds of radar domes, manned by soldiers who live half their lives in twilight. Their job: hear the missile before it screams. Each station a tiny island of humanity. Each operator a sentinel against annihilation. The crash on the ice. January 1968. A B-52 bomber carrying 4 hydrogen bombs crashes near Thule, Greenland. The plane disintegrates over the frozen sea. Fire and radiation fuse into a new kind of snowstorm, particles glowing faint blue in the night. Search teams work in darkness, scraping contaminated ice into barrels marked "Return to you." They find 3 warheads. The 4th never appears. For decades, its resting place beneath the Arctic Sea remained one of the Cold War's coldest secrets. The ice, once again, keeps its silence. Echoes of the past. In the same year, Soviet trawlers near Novaya Zemlya drag nets heavy with rusted canisters, Nazi markings. Dated 1944. Inside, frozen documents sealed in wax, describing Unternehmen Edelweiss Nord, a last German plan to create a polar refuge. The Soviets burn the papers, but the rumor spreads. The Arctic, it seems, still holds chapters no one once read aloud. The Arctic becomes the only place on Earth where every superpower meets and none speak. They circle each other, patient and afraid, using the same language the ice has always spoken: restraint, endurance, cold calculation. The new war is quiet, but it hums beneath every aurora. By the 1,970 seconds, the war has gone invisible. No more parades. No more flags. Just signals coded drifting through polar static. The Arctic becomes the planet's largest antenna. The listeners. Beneath a dome on Spitsbergen, a man in headphones hears the world. His equipment records faint rhythmic taps echoing across the magnetic pole. Not whales, not storms. Too precise, too old. He compares them to World War II Morse patterns. They match. The same signal last logged by a missing U-boat in 1945. He writes one line in his report: "History is still transmitting." The secret cities. In Siberia's far north, the Soviets construct Zato towns, closed cities not shown on any map. Vorkuta, Severomorsk, Polyarny. Each one self-contained. Schools, hospitals, theaters, surrounded by barbed wire and snow. Citizens live, love, and vanish behind the ice curtain. In the archives, these cities appear as white blanks. Even today, satellites show them as blurs. The wreck hunters. The 1,980 seconds bring a thaw, not in ice, but in politics. Joint expeditions begin between former enemies. Norwegian and German teams dive together to locate lost submarines. They find U-480, nicknamed the Black Panther, the first stealth submarine, coated in rubber to evade sonar 40 years before modern stealth technology. It lies upright, preserved, crew still inside, their faces frozen mid-duty. The divers surface in silence. No one says enemy. Not anymore. The secret of Novaya Zemlya. On Novaya Zemlya, the Soviets detonate Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever built. The 30th of October, 1961, 50 megatons. The mushroom cloud rises higher than Everest, visible 600 miles away. It shatters windows in Finland, shakes the aurora itself. The Arctic becomes the echo chamber of human pride. Even the ice cracks in protest. The lost films. In 1989, as the Soviet Union collapses, a historian opens a forgotten archive in Arkhangelsk. Inside are film reels labeled only Nordlicht, Northern Light. They show German officers filming something in 1944. Men placing steel boxes into ice caverns, sealing them with fire. Coordinates are marked, but one frame is missing, cut cleanly out. When the footage ends, silence lingers like guilt. The return of the aurora. By 1991, the Soviet Union dissolves. Radars shut down. Bases abandoned. Submarines left rusting at anchor. Yet from space, the aurora brightens, its green veil dancing over ruins. As if the Earth itself breathes easier when the humans stop shouting. But below the surface, radiation leaks, fuel spills, and forgotten reactors hum softly, a toxic heartbeat in the thaw. History doesn't disappear. It just freezes until we're ready to face it. And the Arctic impartial, eternal, keeps its receipts. The 21st century begins. Satellites see what human eyes never could. The ice retreats faster than anyone predicted. And beneath it, a new battlefield emerges. Old relics, new ambitions. The searchers, scientists and divers, work side by side now. They map wrecks, measure radiation, document remains. Each expedition uncovers layers of story. A Soviet flag over a German submarine. An Allied convoy's hull fused with polar coral. A human jawbone beside a rusted typewriter. The sea has turned archaeology into poetry. The return of the bases. Old airfields on Greenland reopen not for war, but for research. New listening posts rise. Where radar once hummed, drones trace the same routes as Cold War spy planes. And quietly, nations start drawing new maps over melting ice. They call it resource exploration. But every survey feels like reconnaissance. The human cost revisited. Arctic villages still live with the legacy. Children play near buried drums leaking chemicals from the 1,950 seconds. Hunters find mutated seals in thinning ice. They don't know the names of the men who left these poisons behind, but they feel the war's ghost in every fish, every wave. The message in the ice. In 2016, scientists drilling an ice core in northern Greenland hit something solid 50 meters down. Not stone, not metal. A glass cylinder. Inside a paper strip written in German. Ink, perfectly preserved. It reads, "If you find this, know that the war was never only ours." The final dive. A multinational expedition descends beneath the last stable sheet of polar ice near Franz Josef Land. They find a massive steel dome buried, sealed, forgotten. Inside, wartime equipment, fused with Cold War electronics. A time capsule, built by both sides, perhaps unknowingly. Layer after layer. The inscription above the hatch reads, Für die Herren werden. For those who will listen. The final reflection. The Arctic no longer hides our past. It broadcasts it. What was once a frontier of conquest is now a classroom for consequence. Every melt, every discovery, every echo from beneath reminds us that history is not behind us. It is beneath us. The snow has stopped falling. The world has started remembering. It began with war. It ends with witness. The Arctic watched us rise, fight, vanish, and return. Again and again. Chasing power. Leaving ruin. Learning nothing. But someday, when the last glacier melts into the sea, and our descendants sail across the warm bones of history, they'll find our monuments, ships, bunkers, bombs, and wonder what we were trying to prove. And maybe, in that moment, they'll understand that the ice never kept our secrets. It kept our lessons, waiting for us to be ready to learn them.